Crawl, pick up your papers, and crawl back to the kitchen where you belong. Vivian Cross seized the heavy young woman by the wrist, wrenched her forward until the folder flew from her hands and scattered across the marble, then drove one diamond heel down against Claire's shoulder and forced her onto her knees in front of 200 people. The whole ballroom laughed. Claire's palms burned against the cold floor, her eyes stinging, praying she could simply vanish. And that was the exact moment Adrian Moretti, the most feared man in New York, set down his glass and began walking past every model in the room to stop directly over the woman on her knees. Before we go any further, if a story about the woman everyone underestimated is the kind of story you love, please take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel and follow this one all the way to the end, because the twist waiting for you in the final part is one you will never see coming. And do me a small favor, leave a comment and tell me the city you are watching from tonight, so I can see with my own eyes just how far this story has traveled across the world. Now let the story begin. The laughter did not stop when Adrian stood. If anything, it grew louder because the people in that ballroom assumed they understood what was about to happen. They believed the great Adrian Moretti had noticed the same absurd sight they had noticed the heavy-set woman in the plain black dress standing where she did not belong, and that he was crossing the floor to have her removed. A few of the men actually smiled. A senator's wife whispered to the woman beside her that this was going to be delicious. The woman in the diamond gown, whose name was Vivian Cross, tilted her chin up and prepared to enjoy her victory. Her name was Claire Bennett, and she had counted the exits 3 times since the moment she walked in. Claire was not a model. She was not a socialite. She was not anyone's daughter or anyone's wife or anyone's carefully arranged decoration. She was a financial compliance specialist, 31 years old, and she had been sent to this charity gala by an investment firm to do one thing, which was to quietly confirm a set of numbers and then leave before the dessert forks came out. She had told her supervisor she did not belong at an event like this. Her supervisor had told her that nobody looked twice at a woman like her and that this was precisely why she was perfect for the job. Nobody looked twice at a woman like her. Claire had heard some version of that sentence her entire life, and the terrible thing was that she had started to believe it was a compliment. So when Adrian Moretti crossed the ballroom and the room went silent, Claire did the only thing she knew how to do. She got smaller, she pulled the folder tighter, she stared at the polished tips of his shoes and waited to be told to leave. "Claire Bennett," he said. Her head came up before she could stop it. He knew her name. That was the first impossible thing. In a room full of people who had spent fortunes to be recognized by this man, he had walked past all of them to speak the name of a woman he was never supposed to know existed. "You're the one who found the missing millions," Adrian Moretti said. Somewhere behind him, Vivian Cross stopped smiling. Claire's mouth went dry. Every instinct she owned told her to deny it, to laugh nervously, to say she had no idea what he meant. But she had learned a long time ago that she was a poor liar and that the only thing worse than telling the truth was getting caught in a lie by a man who already knew it. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said anyway, because habit is stronger than sense. "No," Adrian said. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. "I don't." For one long moment, the two of them stood in a pocket of absolute silence while 300 of the wealthiest, most powerful people in New York held their breath and waited to understand what they were seeing. "You want to walk with me?" Adrian said. It was not a question. "I want to go home," Claire answered. She heard the gasp before she registered that she had caused it. All around her, people flinched as though she had slapped him. Nobody said no to Adrian Moretti. Nobody. The men who negotiated with him did it with lowered eyes and softened voices, and here was a woman in a discount dress telling him she wanted to go home as if he were a coworker offering her a ride she did not want. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and then, to the horror of everyone watching, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more dangerous than a smile. Something like interest. "Then let me walk you to the door," he said. "It would be rude of me to let you leave alone. There are people in this room who mean you harm Miss Bennett. I would prefer to be the one standing between you and them when you find that out." Claire's stomach dropped straight through the marble floor. "What did you just say?" she whispered. "You heard me." "Who?" she said. "Who means me harm?" Adrian glanced just once over his shoulder. His eyes passed across the crowd like a searchlight, and Claire watched 3 separate people suddenly become very interested in their champagne. That, he said, turning back to her, is exactly what I would like to discuss, somewhere with fewer ears. Now here is the thing that nobody in that ballroom knew, the thing that Claire herself did not fully understand yet. 3 days before this gala, sitting alone in a gray cubicle under a flickering fluorescent light, Claire Bennett had opened a spreadsheet that she was not supposed to be able to read. She had been assigned something dull, a routine review of donations flowing into the Moretti Foundation, the glittering charity that threw galas exactly like this one, and put its name on hospital wings and children's shelters all across the city. Her job was to confirm that money coming in matched money going out. It was the kind of task the firm handed to the person they trusted least with anything interesting, and Claire had learned to make peace with being that person. But Claire had a gift, and it was the single thing in her life she was proud of without apology. She could look at a wall of numbers the way other people looked at a face they loved. She could feel when something was wrong before she could prove it. And on the third night at 11:40 in the evening, with a cold cup of coffee going colder beside her keyboard, she had felt it. A donation of $400,000 had come in from a company. That company had paid it out almost immediately to a second company. The second company had sent it to a third, and the third company did not exist. It had an address that was a parking garage. It had a founder whose signature appeared letter for letter, identical on 19 different documents, which is not how a human being signs their name. Real signatures shake. Real signatures get tired. Claire had followed that $400,000 through 11 companies in 90 minutes, and when she reached the end, she found that it was not $400,000 at all. It was the tale of something much, much larger. It was one visible thread hanging out of a coat, and when she pulled it, the whole garment began to come apart in her hands. Somebody had moved close to $60 million out of that foundation and made it disappear. And they had used Adrian Moretti's name to do it. Claire had sat back in her chair at midnight, alone in an empty office with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. And she had done the thing she was trained to do, which was to save the file encrypted and tell no one. She had told no one. She was certain of that. She had not spoken a word to a single living soul. So how 3 days later did the most feared man in New York City know her name? "How do you know about the file?" Claire said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, and some small-browed part of her held on to that. "Not here," Adrian said. "Yes, here, right here. Because if you know about the file, then either you're the one who moved the money, in which case I am not walking anywhere with you, or someone told you about the file, in which case I am not safe. And I would very much like to understand which of those it is before I take one step in any direction." Adrian Moretti went very still. For a moment, Claire thought she had gone too far. She had a habit of doing that, of pushing exactly one sentence past the point of wisdom, and it had cost her jobs, friendships, and once a relationship that she still thought about at 2 in the morning. She braced herself for the anger. She had been braced for anger her whole life. She knew how to fold up small inside it, but the anger did not come. Instead, Adrian did something that made every hair on Claire's arm stand up. He laughed, softly and with what sounded almost like relief, as though he had been waiting a very long time for someone to speak to him like that. "You know," he said, "in 7 years you are the first person to ask me that question to my face." "That's a terrible thing to be proud of," Claire said. "I didn't say I was proud of it. I said it was true." He glanced again over his shoulder, and this time Claire followed his eyes, and this time she saw who he was looking at. A man stood near the champagne fountain. He was tall and silver at the temples and wore his tuxedo the way other men wore their own skin. He was smiling at something a woman said, and his smile was warm and easy and reached all the way to his eyes, and Claire understood in one cold flash that it was the most frightening thing she had seen all night, because there was nothing behind it at all. "His name is Dominic Vale," Adrian said quietly. "He has been my closest advisor for 11 years. I trusted him with my money, my name, and my life." He paused. "I need you to look at me now and not at him. Can you do that?" Claire dragged her eyes back to Adrian's face. 3 days ago, Adrian said, "Someone inside my organization told me that a compliance specialist at an investment firm had found a hole in the foundation's books. They told me this so that I would deal with the problem. They expected me to make the problem, meaning you, disappear." He let that land. "They did not know that I already suspected the money was gone, And they did not know that I had spent 6 months trying to figure out who inside my own house was stealing it. So when they handed me your name, they thought they were giving me a knife. And what were they actually giving you? Claire said. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time the coldness in his face cracked just slightly, and underneath it she saw something she had not expected. Exhaustion. The bone-deep exhaustion of a man who could not remember the last time he had been able to close his eyes, without wondering who would be standing over him when he opened them. A witness, he said. They gave me the only person in this city who can prove I didn't do it. The band started up again on the far side of the ballroom, and the ordinary noise of the party came flooding back, and Claire realized that the two of them had been standing in a bubble of silence that was now popping all around her. People were talking again, pretending not to watch, but watching. I can't prove anything, Claire said. I have a file. A file can be deleted, a file can be called a fake. I'm a nobody with a spreadsheet, Mr. Moretti, and you're asking me to stand between you and a bullet you think somebody's about to put in your back. Why would I do that? I'm not asking you to stand between me and anything, Adrian said. I'm telling you that you already are standing there whether you like it or not, because the man by the champagne fountain knows that you found what he did, and Dominic does not leave loose threads. He held her eyes. You pulled his thread, Miss Bennett. 3 days ago at 11:40 at night, you pulled his thread and he felt it move. Claire's blood turned to ice water. I never told anyone, she whispered. I never told a single person. I encrypted the file. I didn't email it. I didn't print it. How could he possibly know what time I opened it? Adrian did not answer. He didn't have to. Claire was smart, smarter than everyone in this room combined, and she watched the answer assemble itself in her own mind with a horror that made her feel physically sick. If Dominic knew exactly when she had opened the file, then Dominic had been inside her computer, which meant Dominic had been watching her before she ever found anything, which meant that this whole thing, the assignment, the dull little review, the routine confirmation of numbers, had never been routine at all. Someone had chosen her. Someone had put that file in front of her on purpose. Oh God, Claire said. I was set up. Keep your voice down, Adrian said gently. Somebody wanted me to find it. Her mind was racing now, faster than her mouth, faster than her fear. But that doesn't make sense. If Dominic stole the money, the last thing he'd want is for anyone to find the trail. Why would he hand it to an auditor? Why would he practically gift wrap it for me? Unless, she stopped. Her eyes went wide. Unless what Adrian said, and for the first time there was an edge in his voice because he was watching her get somewhere he had not gotten himself. Unless the money was never the point, Claire said slowly. Unless the trail was the point. Unless somebody wanted a clean, credible third-party investigator to find $60 million stolen from your foundation, so that when the police came or the FBI came or whoever comes for men like you comes, there would be an honest witness ready to swear that the theft traced straight back to you. She looked up at him. They don't want to steal from you, Mr. Moretti. They want to frame you. The money's just the bait. The band played on. Somewhere a woman laughed, and Adrian Moretti stared at a heavy young woman in a plain black dress as though she had just pulled the ceiling down. Say that again, he said quietly. You heard me. I want to hear it again. They're not stealing your money, Claire said. They're building a case, and I'm the prosecution's star witness, except I don't work for the prosecution, I just walked into it, which means when they're done, I don't get to go home either. Star witnesses who might change their story are inconvenient. Her voice caught. I'm not a loose thread, Mr. Moretti. I'm evidence, and you clean up evidence. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Adrian did something that no one in that ballroom had ever seen him do. He extended his hand toward her palm, up an offer instead of an order, and he said the two words that would change the entire course of both their lives. Help me, Adrian Moretti said. And across the ballroom near the champagne fountain, Dominic Vale finally turned his head and looked directly at them, and his warm and easy smile did not change at all, and that was the most terrifying thing of the entire night. Claire did not take his hand. She wanted it understood right then, at the very beginning, before anything else happened, that she was not a woman who took a powerful man's hand simply because he offered it and simply because she was afraid. She had spent 31 years being told what she was worth by people who had decided her value the moment they saw her body, and she had promised herself somewhere back in the ruins of that relationship. She still thought about at 2 in the morning that she would never again let anyone rescue her into a smaller version of herself. No, she said. Adrian's hand did not move. No, Claire said again. I'm not going to be your grateful little witness who does what she's told because the scary man was nice to her once. If we're going to do this, we do it as equals or we don't do it at all. I found the trail. Me. Not your 11 years of instincts and your organization and your money. Me alone at midnight in a cubicle. So if you want my help, you're going to listen when I talk and you're going to do what I say when the numbers say to do it. And you are never not once going to look past me the way every single person in this room has looked past me their entire lives. Are we clear? The silence stretched, and then slowly Adrian Moretti lowered his hand. He did not look insulted. He looked, if anything, fascinated the way a man looks when the world hands him something he did not know existed. We're clear, he said. Good, Claire said, and her voice only shook a little. Now, Adrian said, we need to leave this room and we need to do it in a way that does not make Dominic think anything has changed. Because right now he believes you are a frightened auditor who found something she doesn't understand, and I'm a mafia boss who's about to make her a problem for the last time. As long as he believes that we have a little time, the moment he understands that you and I are working together, that time is gone. He paused. Can you smile at me, Miss Bennett? Right now. Like I just said, something charming, and you're flattered. Can you do that? I'm a terrible actress, Claire said. I know, Adrian said. That's going to be a problem. Try anyway. And Claire Bennett, who had never in her life been asked to smile at a handsome man and mean anything but embarrassment by it, looked up at Adrian Moretti and tried, and it came out crooked and nervous and entirely real, and something in the man's chest did a thing it had not done in years, and he covered it by offering her his arm. She took the arm, not the hand, the arm. There was a difference, and they both knew it. Across the ballroom, Dominic Vale watched them walk toward the doors together, and his warm smile widened by exactly 1 degree, and he lifted his champagne glass in a small private toast to no one, and then he took out his phone and typed a single word, and pressed send. Claire did not know it yet, but that word was a name and the name was hers. They walked past Vivian Cross on the way out. Claire had not planned to slow down. She had planned to keep her eyes forward and her chin up and simply leave the woman behind the way you leave weather behind. But Vivian stepped into her path diamond gown, catching the light red mouth pulled into a smile that had ended 100 lesser women. Adrian, darling, Vivian purred, not even looking at Claire. You cannot be serious. You've been circling me all night. Whatever this is, this little charity project on your arm, surely it can wait until you and I have had a proper conversation. Claire felt herself begin to shrink. 31 years of practice. Her shoulders started to curl inward. Her eyes started to drop, her whole body preparing to become smaller and quieter and easier to overlook, because that was the only survival skill anyone had ever let her keep. And then Adrian said, without any heat at all, in a voice as calm as a still lake, Vivian, in my entire life, I have never once been bored by this woman. I have known you for 6 years. Do the arithmetic. Vivian's face did something complicated and ugly. You'll regret this, she said, and her voice had lost all its silk. I regret a great many things, Adrian said. This will not be one of them. Excuse us. And he walked Claire straight past her and out through the tall doors, and Claire, who was still holding his arm, discovered that she had at some point in the last 10 seconds stopped, shrinking. She was standing up straight. She had not decided to. It had simply happened the way the sun comes up, whether or not you were watching for it. Outside, the night air hit her like cold water, and the reality of what she had just agreed to hit her a half second behind it. I'm out of my mind, Claire said. I have completely lost my mind. I audit spreadsheets. I bring my lunch to work in a container with my name written on the lid in marker so nobody steals it, which they do anyway. I am not a person who gets swept into a mafia war in a ballroom. This is not my life. It is now, Adrian said, and he said it kindly, which somehow made it worse. A black car was already pulling to the curb. A man got out of the driver's seat, young, watchful, and Claire noticed the way his jacket sat wrong on the left side and understood what that meant and understood a great many other things all at once and had to stop on the sidewalk and put her hand against the cold stone of the building and breathe. Miss Bennett, Adrian said, give me a second. We may not have a second. Then you can give me one anyway. She breathed. In, out. She thought about the file encrypted on a drive in her apartment, the only proof in the world of what $60 million really was and where it had really gone. She thought about the fact that she was the only person alive who fully understood the shape of the lie. And she thought about the way the whole ballroom had laughed and the way she had wanted to disappear, and the way that for the first time in her entire life disappearing was now the single most dangerous thing she could possibly do. The file's in my apartment, Claire said, straightening up, on an encrypted drive in a coffee tin in my kitchen because I have watched exactly enough television to be that paranoid and not one show more. If Dominic knows what time I opened it, he knows where I live, which means we have a choice. We can run away from my apartment and keep ourselves safe and let him walk in and take the only copy of the only evidence that clears you. Or we can go there right now before he does and get it. Adrian looked at her. You understand what you're suggesting, he said. You're suggesting we walk toward the danger. I'm suggesting we walk toward the evidence, Claire said, which happens to be where the danger is because that's how these things always work. And I would rather be the one who gets there first. You wanted my help. This is what my help sounds like. It sounds like a woman who is absolutely terrified telling you the smart thing to do anyway. Get in the car. And Adrian Moretti, the most feared man in New York, the man who gave orders that ended lives with the lift of a finger, opened the door of his own car and got in when a heavy-set auditor in a plain black dress told him to. The young driver caught Adrian's eye in the mirror and raised one eyebrow, a question, and Adrian gave a very small shake of his head that meant do as she says, and the car pulled away from the curb into the river of New York night. Marco, Adrian said, this is Miss Bennett. From now on, when she gives an instruction, you treat it the way you treat mine. Marco's eyes flicked to Claire in the mirror, and there was surprise there, and something that was not quite respect yet, but was thinking about it. Yes, boss, Marco said. I'm not anyone's boss, Claire said. I'm an auditor. Ma'am, Marco said, which was a graceful surrender, and Claire decided she liked him. They drove, and as they drove, Claire made herself do the thing she was best at in all the world, which was to stop feeling and start thinking, to take the fear and the noise and fold them into a drawer and shut it, and to look at the numbers. Tell me about Dominic Vale, she said. He came to me 11 years ago, Adrian said. My father had just died. I was 26. I inherited an organization I was not ready for and enemies I did not know I had. Dominic was older, smart, patient. He taught me how to survive. He was the only man in my life who never once tried to take anything from me. He paused. Or so I believed. It appears I believed it because he was taking everything so slowly that I could not feel it move. That's the trick, Claire said. That's always the trick. Fraud isn't a lightning strike. It's erosion. It's a coastline that looks exactly the same every single morning until one day the house falls into the sea. She was quiet for a moment. 11 years. He's been building this for 11 years. You can't know that from a spreadsheet. I can actually, Claire said, because the fake companies, the oldest one in the chain was registered 11 years ago. It never did anything. It sat there clean and boring and empty for a decade, filing its little tax forms, being nobody. And then 18 months ago, it woke up. That's not theft, Mr. Moretti. That's architecture. A thief steals what's in front of him. Dominic built a structure 11 years before he needed it and waited. She turned to look at him. Whatever he's doing, the money is the smallest part of it. He's playing a game so long that you can't see the edges of the board. And he handed me one corner of it 3 days ago. Why now? What changed 18 months ago? What is he getting ready for? Adrian looked at her, and in the passing lights of the city, his face was a series of shadows and edges, and he said very quietly, 18 months ago, I made a decision that I have told no one about. I decided to get out, to end the organization, to take everything my family built and turn it into something legitimate, something that couldn't hurt anyone, and to walk away. He looked out the window. I told exactly one person. Claire felt the whole world go very cold and very quiet. You told Dominic, she said. I told Dominic. He's not stealing your money, Claire said, and her voice dropped almost to a whisper because she was afraid of her own conclusion. He's stealing your organization. The money's just how he's paying for the takeover. He waited 11 years for you to trust him completely, and the moment you decided to leave and hand everything to someone, he made sure that someone was going to be him. And I'm the insurance. If you don't hand it over willingly, he frames you, the FBI takes you, and he inherits everything by default with clean hands and a grieving face. Marco had gone very still in the driver's seat. Adrian Moretti did not say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than it had been all night. Quieter, younger. The voice of a man who had just watched 11 years of his life rearrange themselves into a shape he had never suspected. I would have given it to him, Adrian said. That's the part. If you hadn't found the file, if you hadn't pulled the thread. In another 6 months, I would have called Dominic into my study and told him I was tired, and I trusted him, and I wanted him to take it all, and he would have looked sad, and he would have said he was honored, and I would have handed a good man's whole world to the person who spent 11 years pretending to be worth it. He turned and looked at her. You didn't just find $60 million, Miss Bennett. You found the truth 6 months before it would have been too late to matter. Claire, she said. What? My name is Claire. If we're going to do this, you can use it. Miss Bennett is what my landlord calls me when the rent's late. Something in Adrian's face eased just slightly. Claire, he said, trying it, and it sounded strange and gentle in his mouth, and Claire looked out the window so he would not see what her own face was doing. The car turned onto her street, and Claire, who had spent her whole life being the person nobody looked at twice, felt the fine hairs on the back of her neck rise, and she said, Marco, stop the car. Marco stopped the car. What is it? Adrian said, instantly alert. Claire was staring up the block at her own building, at her own window 3 floors up where she had left the light off because she always left the light off, because she was a woman who lived alone and did not waste electricity and had not been home since morning. The light in her apartment was on. Somebody's already there, Claire said, and her voice did not shake at all, which frightened her more than anything else that had happened all night, because it meant that some cold new part of her had woken up and taken over some part she had not known she had. Somebody's in my apartment right now, which means the file is already gone. Or, she stopped, her mind moved. Or it isn't gone and they're still looking because a coffee tin in a kitchen is not where a smart man looks first, and Dominic sent someone who isn't him, and that person is not smart, and we have about 4 minutes before he gives up and starts breaking things. She turned to Adrian Moretti, and the woman who had wanted to disappear in the ballroom 2 hours ago was nowhere to be found. You wanted to know what my help sounds like, Claire said. It sounds like this. There's a back stairwell. The lock's been broken since I moved in, and the landlord keeps promising to fix it and never does. I know exactly which floorboards creak. I know exactly where the tin is. And I know 100 things about that apartment that the man up there doesn't know because it's mine, and nobody, not Dominic, not you, not anyone knows my own life better than I do. She unbuckled her seatbelt. So here's what we're going to do. And in the dark of the car with the light burning in her stolen window 3 floors up, Adrian Moretti leaned in to listen to the plan of a woman that an entire ballroom had laughed at 90 minutes before. And he did not look past her, not even for a second. And Claire Bennett realized with a jolt that went all the way down to her feet that she was not afraid of the man in her apartment. She was afraid of how much she was starting to like being seen. Whoever's up there, she said, took a job tonight thinking they were sent to scare a fat girl who audits spreadsheets. She reached for the door handle. Let's go correct the record. The plan was simple, which was the only kind of plan that ever survived contact with reality. And Claire had learned that from a lifetime of watching complicated things fall apart. She would go up the back stairwell alone, Adrian and Marco would take the front. The man in her apartment expected one frightened woman or nothing at all. And the last thing he expected was for that frightened woman to walk in the door she was not supposed to know about from a direction he had already dismissed. Absolutely not, Adrian said. You are not going up there alone. I'm the only one who can, Claire said, already unbuckling. You don't know which boards creak. You don't know that the 3rd step is loose and the 9th one screams like a cat. You don't know that the tin is behind the flower, not in front of it, because I moved it last week when I got paranoid. And if you go in there swinging like a Mafia boss, he'll hear you from the street. I go quiet, I go first. You come when I say. Claire, you wanted my help. She had her hand on the door. This is what it costs. You listen to the auditor. For a long moment, Adrian Moretti looked at her in the dark of the car, and something moved across his face that she could not name. And then he said the hardest words she suspected he had ever said to anyone. Fine. She was out of the car before he could change his mind. The night air was cold enough to make her lungs ache, and Claire crossed the street with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She kept telling herself to breathe. She kept telling herself she had done harder things than this. Though the truth was she had not. The truth was that the hardest thing she had ever done before tonight was tell a man she loved that she deserved better and mean it, and even that had taken her 3 years to work up to. But there was a version of courage that came from having no other choice, and Claire was discovering that she had it. Somewhere under all the fear she had it. The back stairwell door was exactly as broken as she remembered. She eased it open, and it did not make a sound, and she stepped inside into the dark she knew better than her own reflection. She skipped the third step. She stepped over the ninth. She moved up through the building as she had lived in for 4 years, past the smell of Mrs. Alvarez's cooking on the second floor, and the water stain on the wall that looked like a rabbit, and every ordinary detail of her ordinary life felt suddenly precious and strange, because a man was standing in her kitchen who had come to take her life apart. At the third floor landing, she stopped and pressed herself flat against the wall beside her own door. It was open, just a crack, just enough. And through the crack she could hear him. A man moving through her thing-opening drawers and muttering under his breath in a low, frustrated voice, and Claire caught the words, "Not here," and "she has to have." And then a crash as something hit the floor, and she recognized the specific sound of her grandmother's ceramic bowl breaking the one thing in the world she had left of the only person who had ever looked at her the way Adrian had looked at her tonight. And something inside Claire went very hot and very still at the same time. She was not afraid anymore. That was the strange part. The moment she heard that bowl break, all the fear drained straight out of her body and left behind something colder and clearer and far more useful. She took out her phone. She typed one word to Adrian, "Now." Then she pushed open her own door and stepped into the light. The man froze. He was young, younger than she expected, with a nervous face and a gun held down at his side like he wasn't sure what to do with it. And Claire understood in one glance that Dominic had not sent a killer. Dominic had sent an errand boy. Dominic had looked at the problem of Claire Bennett and decided it did not deserve a professional. That, Claire thought, was going to cost him. "You broke my grandmother's bowl," Claire said. The young man raised the gun. His hand was shaking. "Don't move. Where is it? Where's the drive?" "You've been through my whole apartment," Claire said, not moving, keeping her voice level and almost gentle, the way you'd talk to a dog that might bite out of fear. "You've torn apart 4 years of my life looking for a coffee tin, and you can't find it, and now you're pointing a gun at me because you're scared of what happens if you go back empty-handed. I know exactly how that feels. Being scared of a powerful man who will be disappointed in you. I've felt that my whole life." "Shut up, where is it?" "His name is Dominic Vale," Claire said. "Is him? The man who sent you. And I need you to understand something because you seem like you might still have a chance to walk out of this as a person instead of a loose end. Dominic doesn't leave witnesses. Not the money, not me, and not you." She watched that land in his eyes. "Whatever he promised you for tonight, you were never going to get paid. You were going to be a body they found near mine. That's how men like him keep the story clean." The gun wavered, and that was the exact moment Adrian Moretti filled the doorway behind him. The young man never heard him coming. Adrian moved it like something that had done this 1,000 times, quiet and absolute, and in less than a second the gun was on the floor, and the young man was against the wall with Adrian's forearm across his throat, and Marco was in the room scooping up the weapon, and it was over so fast that Claire's brain had not finished the sentence she'd been saying. "Please," the young man gasped. "Please, he said, just find the drive. He said nobody would get hurt." "Nobody would get hurt," Adrian repeated very quietly, and there was something in his voice that made even Claire's blood run cold. "Do you know whose apartment this is? Do you know whose grandmother's bowl you broke?" "Adrian," Claire said. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the young man, and his arm was very steady against the boy's throat. And Claire understood that she was watching a decision get made, the kind of decision that this man had been making for 11 years, the kind that ended things. "Adrian," she said again, and this time she crossed the room and put her hand on his arm over the muscle that was pressing the life slowly out of a terrified 20-year-old, and she said, "Let him go. He came here to help kill you. He came here because a rich man told a poor kid to do something and didn't tell him what it really was," Claire said. "Look at him. That's not a killer. That's what you look like when someone smarter than you owns your whole life and you're too far in to see the door." She tightened her hand on his arm. "You told me tonight that in another 6 months you'd have handed everything to Dominic and called it trust. This kid handed Dominic his loyalty for a lot less. Don't punish him for being where you almost were." For a moment, nothing happened. And then slowly, Adrian Moretti let go. The young man crumpled against the wall, gasping his hands at his own throat, and Claire crouched down in front of him while Marco stood over them both with the gun. "What's your name?" she said. "Tommy." "Tommy, okay. Tommy, I'm going to make you an offer, and it's the only one you'll get tonight, and it's better than anything Dominic Vale ever gave you." She looked him dead in the eyes. "You're going to tell us everything. What he told you, how he contacts you, where you were supposed to bring the drive. And in exchange, you don't die tonight, and you don't die next week when Dominic realizes you failed, because you're going to disappear before he can find you. Marco here is going to make sure of it. Do we have a deal?" Tommy looked from Claire to Adrian to Marco, and back to Claire. And Claire watched the exact moment he understood that the only person in the room who was on his side was the woman he'd come to threaten. "Yeah," Tommy whispered. "Yeah, okay, deal." "Good." Claire stood up and her knees only shook a little. She walked to the kitchen, reached into the canister marked flour, pushed her hand down through the flour past a sealed plastic bag, and pulled out the coffee tin she had hidden inside it, because a smart woman hides one thing inside another, and the drive was exactly where she'd left it. She held it up in the terrible light of her ruined apartment. $60 million and 11 years of a man's lies, she said. In a coffee tin, behind the flour. She looked at Adrian. "This is why you needed the auditor." They did not stay. Adrian said, and Claire agreed, that the moment Tommy failed to check in, Dominic would send someone who was not an errand boy, and this time the light in the window would be a signal to walk away. So they took the drive, and they took Tommy, and they left Claire's apartment behind, 4 years of her life scattered across the floor, and Claire stood in the doorway for 1 second and looked at the broken pieces of her grandmother's bowl and made herself a promise she would keep for the rest of the story. They were going to pay for that. All of it. Every laugh in that ballroom, every man who had looked past her, every powerful person who had decided she did not matter. They were going to learn. The car took them out of the city north to a house. Claire did not ask questions about a quiet house behind a gate where the men at the door nodded to Adrian and looked at Claire with open curiosity, because the boss did not bring people here, and he had never once brought a woman. It was nearly 3 a.m. when they finally sat down across a wide table with the drive between them and a laptop open, and Claire's whole terrible discovery laid out in the light. "Show me," Adrian said. "Show me all of it. I want to understand what you understand." So she showed him. She walked him through it the way she wished someone had once walked her through her own life, patiently, without condescension, assuming he was smart enough to follow if she was clear enough to lead. She showed him the first company, the empty one born 11 years ago and left to sleep. She showed him the moment 18 months ago when it woke. She showed him the chain company to company, each one a little more real than the last, until real money moved through them into places it could never be traced. And she showed him the signatures, the same signature, 19 times letter for letter. And she watched Adrian Moretti's face as he understood that a man he had trusted with his life had signed away that life over and over in the same patient, careful hand. "He was so careful," Adrian said quietly. 11 years. He never rushed, never got greedy, never took more than the structure could hide. He looked up. "How did you see it? Truly, I had accountants, I had lawyers, I had men whose entire job was to watch the money, and they saw nothing. How did you in one night see everything?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "Because they were looking for a thief," she said finally. "And I wasn't looking for anything. I was just reading. And when you read numbers instead of hunting them, they tell you the truth, because numbers can't lie the way people can. A person can look you in the eye and tell you they love you and mean nothing. A number just is what it is." She looked down at the screen. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Mr. Moretti. You learn things when you're invisible. You learn to watch. Nobody watches the room like the person nobody's watching. Adrian looked at her across the table, and the exhaustion in his face had been joined by something else. Something she was afraid to name, and he said, "Adrian, I asked you to use my name." "Adrian," she said. And for a moment at 3 in the morning in a quiet house behind a gate, two people who had spent their whole lives being seen wrong looked at each other and were for once seen right, and neither of them knew what to do with it, so they looked back down at the screen. "Okay," Claire said, clearing her throat. "So here's the problem. And it's a big one, and you need to hear it even though you're not going to like it." She turned the laptop so they could both see. "This drive proves that $60 million was stolen from your foundation. It proves the trail. It proves the fake companies. But it does not prove who did it." Adrian frowned. "The signatures. The signatures are on documents that could belong to anyone. Dominic was too smart to sign his own name to a crime. That signature, it's not his. I ran it. It's yours." She let that sink in. "Every single fraudulent document in this chain is signed with a forgery of your signature, Adrian. So if I take this drive to the FBI tomorrow, do you know what it proves? It proves that Adrian Moretti stole $60 million from his own charity and hid it in fake companies. It's not evidence that clears you. In the wrong hands, it's the case that convicts you." The room went very still. Marco, standing by the door, shifted his weight. "You're telling me," Adrian said slowly, "that the only proof of my innocence is also the perfect proof of my guilt." "I'm telling you Dominic is a genius," Claire said. "I'm telling you he built a machine that only works one way. The trail leads to you no matter which direction you run. That's why he was so calm tonight. That's why he smiled. Because he thinks that whatever happens, whether you cooperate or fight, the numbers still point at you. He spent 11 years making sure that the truth and the lie look exactly the same." She closed the laptop. "And there's only one way to break a machine like that." "How?" "You find the one thing he couldn't fake." Claire stood up and started to pace the way she always did when her mind was moving faster than her body could sit still. "A forgery is a copy of something real. To forge your signature 19 times perfectly, letter for letter, Dominic needed a template. A real one. Somewhere out there, there's an original document with your actual signature that he used to build all the fakes. And here's the thing about a man who's careful for 11 years. She stopped and looked at him. He keeps his originals. He can't destroy the template because if any single forgery ever gets questioned, he needs to be able to check it against the real thing to make sure his copy holds up. A careful man never throws away the key to his own lie. It's the one thing he keeps." Adrian was staring at her now. "You're saying somewhere Dominic is holding the one document that proves the signatures are forged." "I'm saying somewhere Dominic is holding the one document that proves he built this," Claire said. "The template's got to have something on it. A date the accounts weren't active yet. A version of your signature you only used before some specific year. Something that puts it in his hands and not yours. And I'll know it when I see it, because reading that kind of thing is the only thing in this world that I'm actually good at." She sat back down, suddenly drained. "So that's the plan. We don't run from Dominic. We can't. The machine follows us. We take it apart. We find the template, and then the numbers stop pointing at you and start pointing at him." And how, Adrian said, "Do we find one piece of paper hidden by the most careful man I have ever known?" Claire looked at Tommy, who had been sitting silent and terrified in the corner this entire time, and Tommy looked back at her, and Claire smiled for the first time all night, and it was not a nice smile. "We asked the errand boy," she said, "where the errands go." Tommy's eyes went wide. It turned out that Tommy knew more than Tommy realized he knew, which is almost always true of the people that powerful men consider too small to matter. He didn't know about the template. He'd never heard the word forgery. But when Claire stopped asking him what he knew and started asking him what he'd done, the whole thing began to open up like a flower. "He had me pick things up sometimes," Tommy said. "From a storage place. Not a bank, a private one, the kind with the fancy vaults downtown. I'd go and I'd give a name, and they'd bring me a box, and I'd bring it to a drop, and I never looked inside because he said if I ever looked inside, I'd be looking at the last thing I ever saw." Tommy swallowed. "I never looked." Claire leaned forward. "Tommy, the name you gave them to get the box, was it Dominic's name?" No, Tommy said. That's the thing. It was never his name. It was always some other name. Different every time, almost. Almost, Claire said, and her whole body went electric. You said almost. What was the name, Tommy? What was the name you gave them the most? Tommy screwed up his face trying to remember, and then he said it, and when he said it, Adrian Moretti went so pale that Claire thought he might be sick. Moretti, I might say, Tommy said, but not Adrian. The other one, a woman's name. I remember because I thought it was weird. Sophia. Sophia Moretti. The silence in that room was total. Adrian, Claire said carefully. Who is Sophia Moretti? Adrian did not answer at first. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone somewhere very far away back into a part of his life that Claire could tell he had sealed off a long time ago. My sister, he said. Sophia was my sister. He looked up and his eyes were terrible. She died 14 years ago, before Dominic ever came to me. She died in a car accident when she was 19 years old, and I was the one who identified her body, and there is no possible reason on this earth that her name should be on a vault full of forged documents. His hands had curled into fists on the table. None, because Sophia has been dead for 14 years, and Dominic did not meet me until 3 years after she was into the ground. Claire's mind is moving very fast now, and she did not like where it was going, and she said it anyway because that was who she was. Adrian, how did your sister die? A car accident. I told you. Who told you it was an accident? The question hung in the air, and Claire watched Adrian Moretti's whole face change, as for the second time that night the ground opened up under a story he had believed his entire adult life. My father, Adrian whispered. My father told me, and then my father brought a man into our organization 3 years later. A patient, careful, brilliant man who taught me everything I know and who has spent 11 years slowly and visibly stealing my entire life out from under me. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. Using my dead sister's name, Adrian. He knew her. The words came out of him like something being torn. He had to have known her. You don't use a dead girl's name to hide your crimes unless that name means something to you. Unless it's a message. Unless it's a joke that only you understand. He pressed his hands flat against the table and leaned on them, and Claire could see him shaking. 14 years I have believed my sister died in an accident, and a man walked into my house 3 years later, and I never once, not one single time, in 11 years, connected him to her. Why would I? He was a stranger. He said he was a stranger. Claire stood up slowly and came around the table, and she did not touch him, because she understood that this was not a moment for being touched, but she stood close enough that he could feel that she was there. Then that's the template, she said quietly, not a document, a name. He didn't just build a machine to frame you, Adrian. He built it out of your sister. The one thing he couldn't fake, the one thing that ties all of this to him, and not to you, is the reason he chose Sophia's name in the first place. Find out what Dominic Vale was to your sister 14 years ago, and you don't just clear yourself. She held his eyes. You find out why any of this is happening at all. Because this was never about $60 million, and it was never about your organization. A man does not spend 11 years and hide behind a dead girl's name for money. This is revenge. Somebody somewhere thinks you owe them something, and they've been collecting for 14 years. Adrian Moretti stared at her. And in the quiet house behind the gate, at nearly 4 in the morning, the whole shape of the thing finally revealed itself, and it was so much larger and so much older and so much more personal than either of them had understood when a heavy young woman knelt on a ballroom floor and a feared man walked past every model in the room to stand over her. It had not started that night. It had started 14 years ago in a car on a road with a girl of 19 who was supposed to have died by accident. I need to see her file, Adrian said. His voice had gone flat and hard and certain. The accident report, the death certificate, everything. I never looked at any of it. I was 22 and my father handled it, and I let him because I couldn't bear to look. I never looked, Claire. In 14 years, I never once looked at the paperwork of my own sister's death. Then that's where we start, Claire said. Not the vault, not yet. The vault is where he keeps the lie. Her death is where he keeps the truth. She looked at him. You've spent 11 years trusting a man because your father brought him to you. It's time to find out what your father actually did. Something crossed Adrian's face at that, something complicated and painful, and Claire filed it away because she was learning to read this man the way she read a spreadsheet, and she had just seen a number that did not add up. "You don't want to look at your father," she said softly. It was not a question. "My father is dead," Adrian said. "He can't defend himself." "That's not what I asked." Claire held his eyes. "I asked why the idea of looking at what your father did makes you look like that. Because you just made a face, Adrian, and I know that face I make that face. It's the face of somebody who's afraid of what they're going to find when they finally look at the person they weren't allowed to question." She took a breath. "What did your father do?" For a long moment, Adrian Moretti was silent, and Claire thought he might not answer, might close the door he had opened by accident, and she would not have blamed him. But he had spent his whole life around people who lied, and tonight, for the first time, he was standing across from someone who didn't, and something in him needed to say it out loud before it ate him alive. "My father was not a good man," Adrian said. "I have spent 11 years trying to become one, trying to turn what he built into something clean, and I told myself I was doing it in his memory. But the truth is I have been doing it to bury him." He looked at her. "Sophia and my father fought. Constantly. She hated this life. She wanted out. She wanted a normal life. She had a boy she loved that my father forbade her from seeing because he wasn't the right kind of person. And 3 weeks after their worst fight, she died in a car accident on a road. She had no reason to be on at a time of night. She had no reason to be out, and I was 22 years old, and I believed every word my father told me because he was my father, and grief makes you a child again." His voice cracked just slightly, and he mastered it. "And I have spent 14 years not looking because some part of me has always known that if I looked, I might find out that my sister didn't die in an accident at all. That my father, he couldn't finish it. That your father had something to do with it," Claire said gently. Adrian nodded once, and it cost him everything. "And now a man is using her name," Claire said, working it through out loud, "to destroy you. A man your father personally brought into your life 3 years after she died. Adrian." She waited until he looked at her. What if the boy she loved, the one your father forbade, what if he didn't disappear? What if he waited 3 years, changed his name, and walked in your front door? The silence that followed was the loudest thing Claire had ever heard. "Dominic Vale," Adrian whispered. "You said he came to you a stranger," Claire said. "You said your father brought him. But you were 26 grieving, drowning, and you never questioned it because why would you question a gift when you were drowning? What if your father didn't bring Dominic to help you?" She felt her own heart pounding. What if your father brought Dominic because Dominic made him? What if Dominic spent 3 years finding out the truth about what happened to the girl he loved, and then walked into the house of the family that killed her and made your father install him at the right hand of the son, and has spent 11 years since then taking apart everything your father built one careful piece at a time, using the dead girl's name because he wants you to know at the very end exactly why? Adrian Moretti sat down, slowly, like a man whose legs had stopped working. "He's not stealing my organization for money," he said in the voice of a man reading his own execution. "He's stealing it because my family took the only thing he ever loved, and he has spent his entire adult life making sure that I lose everything the same way she did. Slowly, so I'd have time to understand it, so I'd feel it coming." "And the frame," Claire said quietly. "The FBI, the forged signatures. He doesn't just want to take it from you. He wants the whole world to believe you're a monster while he does it. He wants you to die in a cell disgraced alone with everyone thinking you stole from a children's charity while he walks away clean and free and finally even." She swallowed. "That's the machine, Adrian. That's what I walked into. That's what was hiding behind $60 million. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian looked up at her, and his eyes were wet, and his voice was very steady, and he said, "You could leave. Right now. Tonight. I could give you money, a name, a life somewhere. Dominic will never find you, and you could walk out of this house and never think about the Moretti family again. And it would be the smart thing, the sane thing, the thing anyone with sense would do." He held her gaze. "This was never your fight. You audited a spreadsheet. You don't owe me a war." And Claire Bennett, the woman that an entire ballroom had laughed at, the woman who had been invisible her whole life, the woman who was still wearing the plain black dress she'd been forced to her knees in, looked at the most feared man in New York, and thought about her grandmother's broken bowl, and the laughing and the diamond heel against her shoulder, and every single time in her life, someone had decided she did not matter. Here's the thing about being invisible, she said. You spend your whole life watching people decide you don't count, and you start to believe them. You get small, you get quiet, you audit spreadsheets, and you write your name on your lunch, and you pray the floor will open up and swallow you. She stepped closer. And then one night a man walks past every beautiful woman in a room full of people who count, and he stops in front of you, and he says your name, and for the first time in your whole life, somebody looks at you like you're real. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. I am not walking out that door, Adrian. Not because I owe you a war, because for the first time in 31 years, I am not invisible, and I would rather die visible than live one more day being nobody. So no, I'm staying. And we are going to take Dominic Vale apart, and we are going to clear your name, and we are going to find out the truth about your sister. She lifted her chin. And when it's done, every single person who ever laughed at me is going to learn my name. Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he stood up, and he crossed the space between them, and he did not embrace her, and he did not take her hand, because he understood by now that those were not the things she needed. Instead, he did the one thing she had asked of him in the ballroom, the thing no one had ever done for her, the thing that was worth more to her than anything else in the world. He looked at her, fully, completely, as an equal. Then we start with my sister, he said. First thing tomorrow, we pull the file, we find the truth, and Claire, he paused. Whatever we find in that file, whatever my father did, whoever Dominic really is, I need you to promise me one thing. What? When it gets bad. And it's going to get bad when the man who's watched me for 11 years realizes his errand boy failed and comes for us himself. When it stops being spreadsheets and starts being real. His jaw tightened. You don't get small again. You don't disappear. You stay exactly this visible no matter how much of you wants to hide, because the moment you get small is the moment he wins. Claire looked at him. I promise, she said. And in the corner, Tommy the errand boy watched the two of them and thought that he had never in his life seen anything like it, and understood in his small and terrified way that he had come to that apartment to threaten the wrong woman, and that nothing about the world he thought he knew was going to survive what these two people were about to do. Marco stepped in from the hall, his phone in his hand, and his face was wrong. Boss, he said, you need to see this. What is it? Adrian said. Marco turned the phone around, and on the screen was a photograph sent from a number with no name. A photograph taken from across a dark street of a broken window 3 floors up, and a light burning inside, and beneath it, a single line of text. You found her first. Impressive. But you should ask Claire Bennett why an investment firm sent an auditor to my gala who was fired from that same firm 8 months ago. Claire felt the floor tilt. That's not true, she said, but her voice had gone thin. I work there. Adrian turned to look at her, and for the first time all night, something uncertain moved behind his eyes. And Claire saw it, and it hurt worse than the diamond heel, worse than the laughing, worse than anything. Claire, Adrian said slowly, who sent you to that gala tonight? And Claire Bennett opened her mouth to answer and realized with a horror that turned her cold from the inside out that she did not actually know. I don't know, Claire said, and the words came out of her like a confession. Oh my God, I don't actually know. Adrian did not move. Marco did not lower the phone, and the whole quiet house behind the gate seemed to hold its breath while Claire Bennett stood in a plain black dress at 4 a.m. and tried to remember the shape of her own life. Talk, Adrian said. His voice had gone flat again the way it had gone flat in her apartment right before he'd put a man against the wall. Tell me exactly how you ended up at my gala tonight. Every step. Don't leave anything out, and don't clean it up to sound better, because I will know. I got an email, Claire said. Her mind was racing backward, and every step she found made her feel sicker. Monday morning, from my supervisor's account, assigning me the foundation review. It said it was routine, it said it was low priority, it said finished by Friday. And then Wednesday I found the file, and Thursday there was a second email from the same account saying the client wanted an in-person confirmation at the gala, that I should attend, that I be on the list at the door. She looked up. I thought it was strange. I did think it was strange. Auditors don't go to galas. We don't do anything in person. That's the whole point. We're supposed to be invisible. But I told myself it was because the account was important and they wanted to look thorough for the client, and her voice broke. I wanted to go. God help me, I wanted to. Because for once, someone was asking me to be in the room instead of behind a screen, and I let myself believe it was because I mattered. Who is your supervisor? Adrian said. His name is Gerald Foss, and it was his account the emails came from. Yes, his account, but Claire stopped. The blood drained out of her face as she said it out loud for the first time. But I never talked to him. Not once, not about the assignment, not about the gala, nothing. Every single thing came by email, and I never questioned it because Gerald hated talking to me. He'd been trying to push me out for months, so getting instructions by email instead of in person felt normal. It felt like a relief. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The message said I was fired 8 months ago. Adrian, what if I was? You'd know if you were fired. Would I? Claire's voice climbed. I work remote 4 days a week. I badge into an empty floor. I do my work. I submit it. I get paid, and nobody has said a single word to me that wasn't an email in longer than I can remember. I have not had a real conversation with another human being at that company, and she stopped. She did the math, and the math was a horror. In about 8 months, the room went very quiet. You're telling me, Adrian said slowly, that for 8 months you may have been working for a company that already fired you. I'm telling you that someone has been sending me assignments and paying me, and I never questioned it because I was so grateful to be left alone that I never looked up. Claire sat down hard because her legs had stopped holding her. Someone built me a job, Adrian. A fake one. Just real enough that I wouldn't notice. They kept me employed, kept me isolated. Kept me exactly where they needed me. And then, when it was time, they fed me a spreadsheet with $60 million hidden in it and told me to go to a gala. She looked up and her eyes were wide with something close to awe and close to terror. Dominic didn't just build a machine to frame you. He built a machine to build me. I'm not an auditor who stumbled into this. I'm a piece he carved. That's the message, Marco said quietly, still holding the phone. That's what he wants us thinking. That she's his. No, Claire said, and something hardened in her voice. No, he wants Adrian thinking that. Look at the timing. Look at what that message does. It doesn't come when I'm across the room from Adrian. It doesn't come at the gala. It comes now, tonight at 4 a.m. in this house, the exact moment Adrian and I have started to trust each other. He waited until we were a team, and then he sent a message designed to do one thing. She turned to Adrian. Make you doubt me. Because a man who's been alone at the top for 11 years, a man who just found out his most trusted advisor betrayed him, that man's whole world is built on one question. Who can I trust? And Dominic just poured poison into the only new answer you have found. She held his eyes. Whether or not I'm his, the message works either way. If I'm innocent, it makes you push away the one person helping you. If I'm guilty, you already knew. There's no version where sending that message hurts him. Which means it's not information. It's a weapon. And you're the target. Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long, long moment. That's a very clever thing to say, he said quietly, for someone who might be working for the man who's trying to destroy me. The words landed like a slap. Claire flinched physically, and for one terrible second, she was back on that ballroom floor with a heel on her shoulder, and she felt the old pull, the ancient gravity of her whole life dragging her down towards small and quiet and gone. And then she remembered what she'd promised him 20 minutes ago. Don't get small. Don't disappear. She stood up. You're right, she said, and her voice did not shake. You should doubt me. You'd be an idiot not to. A stranger falls into your life the same week your world starts collapsing, and now there's a message saying she's not what she claims. Any smart man doubts that. Any man who's survived 11 years in your world doubts that. She walked around the table closer to him, close enough that he couldn't look past her. So let's not pretend. Let's not have you smile at me and secretly wonder. Let's do the one thing I'm actually good at. Let's audit me. Adrian blinked. What? Audit me, Claire said. You want to know if I'm his? Then stop asking me, because of course I'm going to say no and start looking at the numbers. Because numbers don't lie the way people do. That's what I told you tonight, and I meant it. and it applies to me too. So here's my whole life, my bank accounts, my emails, my phone, my apartment, all of it. Marco can pull it apart. If Dominic built me, there's a seam somewhere, a payment that came from the wrong place, a deposit that doesn't match my salary, a phone that called a number it shouldn't have. Find it. If it's there, I'm his, and you should put me somewhere I can't hurt you. She took a breath. And if it's not there, then you're going to stop wondering, and you're going to trust me completely, because half trust in a war like this gets us both killed. She held out her own phone. Audit me, Adrian. I dare you. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Adrian Moretti took the phone. It took Marco 2 hours. It was 6 in the morning when he came back into the room, and Claire had not slept, and Adrian had not slept, and the two of them had sat in a silence so thick you could have stood a spoon in it, neither one willing to speak first, both of them waiting for a verdict that would either save something or end it. Marco set a laptop on the table. She's clean, he said. Claire let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 8 months. But, Marco said, and Claire's stomach dropped again. Not the way you think. He turned the screen. Her bank's clean, her phone's clean, no hidden payments, no calls to numbers that matter nothing. If Dominic built her, he didn't pay her, and he didn't talk to her. Which honestly, boss, would be the first sloppy thing he's done in 11 years, and he's not sloppy. Marco pointed at the screen. But her employment records aren't clean. They're gone. Not altered. Gone. Claire Bennett was terminated from Halloran Witt Financial 8 months ago, exactly like the message said, and then every record of that termination was scrubbed, and a fake active employment file was put in its place, and the paychecks she's been getting for 8 months didn't come from Halloran Witt at all. They came from a shell company. He looked up. A shell company in the chain, one of Dominic's. The room went silent. So the message was true, Adrian said slowly. The message was true, Marco said. She was fired. She has been working for Dominic for 8 months without knowing it. But boss, well, Marco looked at Claire and there was something almost gentle in his hard face. She didn't know. There's no world where she knew. A person who knew would have covered these tracks. She left every single one of them out in the open because she had no idea they were there. He didn't recruit her. He didn't turn her. He farmed her. He kept her alive and paid and isolated and unaware, like a cow that doesn't know it's on a ranch until the day he needed her to walk into a gala and find a spreadsheet. Marco closed the laptop. She's not his agent boss. She's his victim. Same as you. Claire sat very still. 8 months, she whispered. For 8 months, I thought I still had a job. I thought I was too small to fire. I told myself they kept me because I was invisible, and it wasn't worth the paperwork to let me go. Her voice cracked. But nobody kept me because I didn't matter. Somebody kept me because I was useful to a stranger who never once had to look me in the eye. She laughed, and it was a terrible sound. I've spent my whole life being nobody, and it turns out the only person who ever paid attention to me, the only person who ever needed me to keep existing, was a man building a machine to destroy someone else. That's my one great value. I was the perfect tool because nobody would ever look twice at me. He chose me for the exact same reason everyone's always overlooked me. No, Adrian said. She looked up. He had crossed the room and he was standing in front of her, and whatever doubt had been in his eyes 2 hours ago was gone, burned away by 6 hours and a set of numbers, and what was left was something fierce. He chose you because nobody would look twice, Adrian said, and it was the biggest mistake he has made in 11 years, because he needed a tool and he reached into the pile of people the world ignores, and he pulled out the one person in that pile who reads numbers like scripture and doesn't know how to stop pulling a thread once she's started. He crouched down in front of her chair so that for once he was looking up at her instead of down. He thought he was picking up a piece of glass. He picked up a blade, and now it's in my hand instead of his. Claire looked at him and something passed between them that neither of them named. I trust you, Adrian said. Completely. No more doubt. The audit's done and I know you the way I know the numbers now. You're not his, you're mine. He caught himself. Ours. This is ours now. Okay, Claire said, and her voice was very small, and then she made it bigger because she'd promised. Okay, then let's use it. He thinks I'm his tool. He doesn't know Marco found the shell company in my paychecks. He doesn't know we know that I was fired. She was already moving, already thinking 3 steps ahead the way she did. As far as Dominic knows right now, that message he sent either turned you against me or blew up in his face and he doesn't know which. He's sitting somewhere waiting to find out what we do next. So let's give him something to see. What are you thinking, Adrian said. I'm thinking he expects one of two things, Claire said. Either you kick me out, in which case he wins, or you keep me and we go dark and start hunting the vault, in which case he knows we're coming and he moves the template. Both of those he's ready for. So we do the third thing, the thing he's not ready for. She looked at Adrian. We give him me back. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately. Hear me out. No, I just spent 6 hours deciding to trust you and you want me to hand you to him. I want him to think you handed me to him, Claire said. There's a difference and it's the whole game. Listen, he built me to be invisible and disposable. He kept me isolated so no one would question me. That's his design, so let's use his own design against him. I go back to Halloran Witt or to whatever contact he uses and I play the tool. I play the scared little auditor who got in over her head and just wants to keep her fake job and go home. I tell him you threaten me, that I'm terrified that I'll give him anything he wants if he just makes it stop. She was talking fast now. A man like Dominic, a man who farmed a person for 8 months, he doesn't respect me. He can't. If he respected me, he wouldn't have used me. So when the tool comes crawling back, scared and useful, he's going to believe it because it confirms everything he already thinks about who I am. And a man who underestimates you tells you things. He'll want to use me again. And the next thing he uses me to do will tell me exactly where that vault is and what's in it. The room was silent. That's insane, Adrian said. That's completely insane. He tried to have you killed tonight. No, he didn't, Claire said. He sent an errand boy to steal a drive. If he'd wanted me dead, Tommy would have been someone else. He doesn't want me dead, Adrian, not yet, because a dead auditor is a mystery and a live auditor is a witness he controls. He needs me alive to testify against you when the FBI comes. That's my whole purpose in his machine, which means the one thing I'm safe from right up until the end is dying. He can't kill the witness before the trial. She looked at him. It's the only safe move I have, and it works precisely because he thinks I'm too small to have thought of it. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and Claire watched him war with it. Watched the man who kept everyone at a distance struggle against the idea of sending the one person he just decided to trust straight back into the mouth of the thing that wanted to eat them both. If anything goes wrong, Adrian said finally, if he so much as looks at you sideways, then Marco's outside and Tommy tells us the drop points and we have a plan, Claire said. I'm not being brave, Adrian. I'm being an auditor. I ran the numbers on every other option and they all end with him moving the template before we find it. This is the only path where we get to the truth first. She paused. But I need one thing from you before I do it. Anything. I need you to pull your sister's file today. While I'm playing his tool, I need you to be finding out what really happened to Sophia 14 years ago because that's the thing he can't move and can't hide and can't fake. The vault is the lie. Her death is the truth. And when I come back from Dominic with the location of the lie, I need you to already be holding the truth so we can put them next to each other and break his whole machine in half. She looked at him. Can you do that? Can you look at the thing you've spent 14 years refusing to look at? Adrian Moretti was quiet. I've been afraid of that file my whole adult life, he said finally. I know. I told you, some part of me has always known that if I look, I'll find out my father. He couldn't finish it again. I know, Claire said gently, and I'll tell you what I know about looking at the things we're afraid of because I just did it tonight. I just found out my whole life for 8 months was a lie built by a stranger, and it was the worst thing I've ever felt, and I would do it again in a heartbeat because the alternative was staying blind and being used. She reached out, and this time she did touch him, just her hand on his arm. The truth already happened, Adrian. It's already true. Whatever your father did, he already did it 14 years ago, and you not looking at it hasn't made it less true. It's only made you carry it without knowing what it is. Looking won't make it worse. Looking just means you finally get to see the weight you've been carrying. She squeezed his arm, and you don't have to carry it alone anymore. That's the part that's new. That's the part he didn't plan for. Adrian looked down at her hand on his arm. When did you get so wise? He said quietly. I've always been wise, Claire said. Nobody was ever looking. That's the whole tragedy of being invisible. All that wisdom and no one in the room. Adrian huffed something that was almost a laugh, and then his face went serious again, and he stood, and Claire watched him make a decision that she suspected was harder for him than any order he'd ever given. Marco, he said, get me everything on my sister's death. The accident report, the coroner's report, the death certificate, the police file, all of it. I don't care who you have to call or what it costs. I want it on this table by noon. Yes, boss. And Claire, Adrian turned back to her. If you're doing this, if you're really going back to him, then we do it my way for the safety and your way for the strategy, and neither of us moves without the other knowing. That's the deal. That's the only way I let you walk out that door. That's the deal, Claire said. And so at 7 in the morning, with the sun coming up over a city that had laughed at her 12 hours before Claire Bennett began the most dangerous performance of her life, and it started with a phone call. She called the number that had always sent her assignments. The number she'd assumed for 8 months belonged to some faceless HR system at Haller & Witt, and this time, for the first time, someone answered. Miss Bennett, a man's voice, warm, easy, reaching all the way to nothing. And Claire's blood ran cold because she knew that voice. She'd heard it laugh across a ballroom 12 hours ago at something a woman had said she'd watched it belong to a man by a champagne fountain, with a smile that hid an abyss. I was hoping you'd call. I imagine you've had quite a night. Dominic Vale, answering the number himself, which meant he'd never trusted anyone else with her, which meant she mattered to him more than she'd realized, and that was either very good or very bad, and she wouldn't know which until it was too late to change course. Mr. Vale, Claire said, and she let her voice shake, which was not hard because it wanted to. I don't understand what's happening. There was a man tonight, Adrian Moretti. He knew my name. He knew about the file, and then there were men with guns, and I ran. I've been running all night, and I found this number in my email, and I need someone to tell me what's happening. I never signed up for. Shh, Dominic said, and it was the most frightening sound Claire had ever heard. That gentle, patient shush, the sound of a man soothing a tool that had started to squeak. You poor thing. Of course you're frightened. You've done nothing wrong, Claire. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You found something you were meant to find, and now some very dangerous people know you found it, and I am the only person in the world who can protect you from them. A pause. Where are you right now? And there it was, the first test. The question that would tell him everything about whether she was really his frightened tool or Adrian's planted spy. Claire closed her eyes. I'm at a diner, she said, on 9th. I've been sitting here for an hour because I'm scared to go home. I think there was someone in my apartment. My grandmother's bowl. Her voice cracked, and this part was real. This part was so real it hurt. Someone broke my grandmother's bowl. Why would someone break my grandmother's bowl? What did I do? There was a silence on the line. And when Dominic spoke again, something had shifted. Something Claire couldn't quite read, and her heart began to pound. You didn't do anything, Dominic said slowly. But Claire, I need you to listen to me very carefully now, because what I'm about to say is going to be hard to hear. A pause. The man who broke your grandmother's bowl. The man in your apartment tonight. Another pause. That was Adrian Moretti's man. And the reason I know that, the reason I know exactly what happened in your apartment tonight, is because I've been watching that apartment for a very long time. His voice dropped warm and terrible. Longer than you've lived there, Claire. Long before you ever got that job. You want to know why someone kept you employed for 8 months after you were fired. You want to know why a nobody auditor got sent to the most exclusive gala in New York. Claire couldn't breathe. Because your grandmother, Dominic said, the one whose bowl just broke. Her name was Rosa Bennett. And 14 years ago, Rosa Bennett was the only witness to what really happened to a 19-year-old girl on a dark road outside the city. A girl named Sophia Moretti. A breath. Your grandmother saw everything, Claire. And she told exactly one person the truth before she died. She told you. You just don't remember because you were a child, and children forget the things that would break them. The voice was almost tender now. You're not a tool I picked at random, sweetheart. You're the only other person alive who was ever connected to that girl's death. I didn't farm you. I found you. I've been protecting you your whole life, waiting for the day you'd be ready to help me finish this. And that day is today. The phone shook in Claire's hand. You're lying, she whispered. Am I? Dominic said. Then ask yourself one thing, Claire Bennett. In 8 months of that lonely little job, of that empty floor, in those emails, in that invisible life, did you ever even once wonder why the numbers came so easily to you? Why you could read a fraud that fooled trained accountants? Why you, of all the people in that city, were the one who could pull the thread? His voice was a blade wrapped in silk. Your grandmother taught you to read the books, the real books, when you were 9 years old, sitting at her kitchen table before she died. You've been training for that gala your entire life, and you never knew it. Come in, Claire. Come to me, and I will tell you the truth about who you are and who your family was and what the Morettis took from both of us. Claire sat frozen in the quiet house behind the gate phone pressed to her ear, and across the room, Adrian Moretti was watching her face go white, watching something come apart behind her eyes, and he mouthed the words, "What's wrong?" And Claire could not answer him, because the man on the phone had just told her that everything she thought she knew about her own grandmother, her own childhood, her own strange and lonely gift was a lie. And the worst part, the part that turned her cold all the way through, was that she could not prove that it wasn't true. Claire, Dominic said gently, are you still there? I'm here, Claire whispered. Good, Dominic said. Now come home. It's time you learned why you were born. I'm here, Claire whispered again into the phone, and then she did the hardest thing she had done all night. Harder than the ballroom, harder than the apartment, harder than the audit. She kept her voice small and frightened and lost, and she said, okay, I'll come. Just please give me an hour. I can't think, I need to breathe. Please just give me an hour, and I'll come to wherever you say. Of course, Dominic said, warm as a knife going in. Take your hour, I'll send you an address. And Claire, a pause. Don't tell Adrian Moretti about this call. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's made you believe, that man is the reason your grandmother is dead. Come to me and I'll prove it. The line went dead. And Claire Bennett set the phone down on the table with a hand that was shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. And she looked up at Adrian, and the whole story she'd been so certain of an hour ago lay in pieces around her feet. He knew about the bowl, she said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Adrian, he knew my grandmother's name. He knew she was a witness. He said she saw what happened to Mafia, to Sophia. He said I was there when she told the truth. He said I've been training my whole life for that gala, and I never knew it. She pressed both hands flat on the table to stop them shaking. He said you're the reason she's dead. Adrian had gone very still. And you believe him, he said quietly. I don't know what I believe, Claire said, and it came out raw. That's the thing, Adrian, that's the poison. He didn't tell me a lie I could catch. He told me a story I can't disprove. I don't remember my grandmother very well. She died when I was 9. I have exactly 3 memories of her, and one of them is her kitchen table and me doing sums, and I always thought that was just a warm little nothing, just a grandmother teaching a kid arithmetic. And now this man has taken that one warm memory and turned it into evidence that my whole life is a conspiracy. She looked up and her eyes were wet with fury and fear at once. He reached into the one clean place I had left and put his fingerprints on it. That's what he does. That's the machine. He doesn't beat you. He makes you doubt your own memories. Adrian came around the table and sat down across from her, close, and he did not reach for her, but he leaned in so she couldn't look anywhere but at him. Then let's do what you told me to do, he said. Let's audit it. He gave you a story. Stories can be checked. Was your grandmother's name Rosa Bennett? Yes. Did she die when you were 9? Yes. How did she die? Claire opened her mouth and stopped, and the blood drained from her face all over again. I don't know, she whispered. I never asked. I was 9. Nobody tells a 9-year-old how her grandmother died. They just say she's gone, and they put you in a black dress, and you don't ask. She stared at him. Oh, God, I don't know how my own grandmother died. Then that, Adrian said, is the first number we check, because Dominic told you a story where your grandmother was a witness to my sister's death. And there's a very simple way to test that story, Claire. If your grandmother witnessed a crime 14 years ago and then died, then her death and my sister's death are connected. And Marco is bringing me my sister's file at noon. He looked at her steadily. We were already going to open one grave today. We'll just open two. Claire stared at him, and slowly, the terror in her face began to give way to something else, something colder and clearer, the thing that always came to her when she stopped feeling and started reading. He made a mistake, she said. What? Dominic? On the phone, he made a mistake and he doesn't know it. Claire sat up straighter. He wanted to shake me, so he told me more than he needed to. He didn't just say my grandmother was a witness. He said she saw what really happened on a dark road outside the city. He said she told exactly one person before she died. He gave me details, Adrian. And a man who's been careful for 11 years does not give away details unless he thinks the person hearing them will never get to use them. She met his eyes. He thinks I'm coming to him. He thinks in an hour I'll be sitting across from him, and none of this will matter because I'll be his. So he got sloppy because, in his mind, I'm already caught. Her jaw tightened. Let's make him regret every word. Noon came slow, and it came fast the way the worst hours do. Marco walked into the room at 11:52 with a thick folder under his arm and a look on his face that told Claire he had already read it and that whatever was in it had cost him something to read. I got everything, Marco said. Sophia Moretti's accident report, coroner, police file, and boss. He set the folder down like it was heavy. I got the Rosa Bennett file, too, Claire's grandmother, because once I had a name and a date, I ran them together and he stopped. You need to read them side by side. I'm not going to tell you. You need to see it yourself. Adrian opened the folder. Claire watched his face as he read, and she would remember that face for the rest of her life, the way it went from grief to confusion to something that had no name, a slow dawning horror that pulled all the color out of him and left something hollow behind. Adrian, she said, what is it? Talk to me. He didn't answer. He turned a page, turned another, and then he looked up and his voice came out flat and strange. My sister didn't die in a car accident, he said. The room went silent. The accident report says single vehicle lost control, went off the road on a curve at 11 at night. That's the story. That's what my father told me. That's what I believed for 14 years. He set the report down. But the coroner's report tells a different story, Claire. The coroner found injuries that don't match a car accident. And there's a note, a handwritten note in the file from the coroner that says he raised these concerns and was told to sign the report as an accident anyway. Adrian's hands were shaking now. My sister was killed, and someone made a doctor lie about it. And that someone had the kind of power that makes doctors lie. He looked up. That someone was my father. Claire reached across the table and took his hand, and this time he let her, and he held on. There's more, Marco said quietly. The Bennett file. Rosa. Adrian pulled it forward, and Claire watched him read her grandmother's death, and she braced herself because Dominic had put a story in her head, and she was about to find out if it was true. Rosa Bennett, Adrian read, died 3 weeks after my sister. Cause of death listed as heart failure. He paused. But there's a police report attached to it, Claire, from 2 days before she died. Your grandmother walked into a police station and tried to report that she'd witnessed a young woman being run off a road on the night of, he checked the date, the night my sister died. She said it wasn't an accident. She said she saw a second car. She gave a statement. His voice dropped. And the officer who took the statement filed it under a name and a case number that don't exist anymore. The report's here because someone kept a copy, but the original was buried. And 2 days later, your grandmother's heart failed. A healthy 61-year-old woman. Claire could not breathe. He was telling the truth, she whispered. Dominic was telling the truth. My grandmother saw it. She tried to report it, and she died. Her whole body had gone cold. He wasn't lying to shake me. He was lying with the truth. That's worse. That's so much worse. Not all of it was true, Adrian said, and there was iron in his voice now. He told you I was the reason your grandmother is dead. Look at the date, Claire. Look at when this happened. He pushed the file toward her. 14 years ago. I was 22 years old. I had nothing to do with the organization. I was in school. I did not take over it until my father died 4 years later. I didn't kill my sister, and I didn't kill your grandmother. I didn't even know either of them had been murdered until 10 minutes ago. He held her eyes. The man who ran Sophia off that road and the man who had your grandmother silenced 2 days after she tried to tell the truth was the same man. And it wasn't me, Claire. It was my father. The two of them sat in the wreckage of it, holding hands across a table. Two people whose families had collided 14 years ago on a dark road and who had spent their whole lives paying for it without ever knowing why. Sophia wanted out, Adrian said slowly, working it through his voice thick. She had a boy she loved. My father forbade it. They fought, and 3 weeks later she died on a road she had no reason to be on. He closed his eyes. She was running away. She was running to that boy. And my father found out, and he decided that a Moretti daughter running off with the wrong kind of person was a shame he couldn't survive, so he had her stopped. Permanently. And your grandmother happened to be on that road, and she saw, and when she tried to tell the truth, he had her erased too. He opened his eyes. 2 families, 1 dead girl, 1 dead witness. And my father buried both of them and told everyone it was accidents and heart failure, and he got away with it because that's what power buys. And Dominic, Claire said, and Dominic, Adrian said, is the boy she loved. The certainty landed in the room like a stone. It has to be, Adrian said. It's the only thing that makes all of it true at once. The boy my father forbade. He loses Sophia. He finds out it wasn't an accident. He spends 3 years learning the truth, and then he walks into my father's house and makes himself indispensable. And my father, who owed him a dead girl, couldn't say no, could he? Couldn't refuse him. That's why my father brought a stranger into our lives and handed him to me. It wasn't a gift. It was a debt. Dominic didn't ask to join us. He collected. Adrian's jaw was tight, and then he waited. 11 years. He got close to me, the son of the man who murdered the woman he loved, and he made me trust him, made me love him like family. And all that time he was building the machine because killing me fast was never going to be enough. He wanted me to lose everything the way he lost everything. Slowly, with plenty of time to understand. He looked at Claire, and he found you. The granddaughter of the woman who died trying to get justice for his Sophia. And he decided we'd finish it together, you and him. The 2 people the Morettis wronged, taking down the last Moretti standing. Except I'm not the last thing he wronged, Claire said quietly. I'm the granddaughter of a woman he got killed. Not by you, by your father, but she was still trying to tell the truth about the girl he loved. She died on Sophia's side. And instead of protecting her family, instead of protecting me, he farmed me. He kept me isolated and small and useful for 8 months and reached into my one warm memory of my grandmother and used it as a weapon. Her voice hardened. He didn't find a fellow victim, Adrian. He found another tool. He's not avenging Sophia, he's just doing to me exactly what your father did to her. Using people and throwing them away. The only difference is he tells himself it's for love. Adrian looked at her and something passed over his face, understanding and grief and a slow-building anger that was cleaner than anything Claire had seen in him yet. You're right, he said. God, you're right. He's become the thing he hates. He watched my father treat people like pieces on a board, and he spent 14 years learning to do it better. He stood up, and in an hour he thinks the last piece is going to walk into his hands and thank him for it. Which means, Claire said, and she stood up too, we know something now that changes the whole game. Dominic doesn't just want your organization. He doesn't just want you framed. Those are means. What he wants, what he's actually wanted for 14 years, is for you to understand right at the end exactly why it's happening. He wants a moment, a confession scene. He wants to look you in the eye and tell you about Sophia before he finishes it, because if you die not knowing why, then he hasn't won, he's just committed a murder. She looked at Adrian. He needs to explain himself. And a man who needs to explain himself is a man who will talk. And a man who talks near me is a man who's already lost, because I have spent my whole life being the person nobody notices in the room, and I notice everything. You want to walk into his confession? Adrian said slowly. I want to give him the moment he's waited 14 years for, Claire said. The scared little tool comes crawling in, and the great Dominic Vale finally gets to sit across from a Bennett and a Moretti's ally and explain at last why he did all of it. He gets his scene. And while he's monologuing about love and justice and the girl he lost, I get the one thing we still don't have. She looked at Adrian, the location of that vault, because he can't help himself. He's going to want me to know everything. He's going to want to show me the proof, the originals, the template, all of it, because in his mind, I'm the last living link to the woman who tried to save his Sophia, and he needs me to believe he's the hero of this story. Her jaw set. He's going to open the vault for me himself. And when he does, you're going to be listening to every word. It's too dangerous, Adrian said. He murdered your grandmother's memory to get you in a room. What happens when he realizes you're not his? He murdered a lot of things, Claire said. But here's what he never counted on. He built his whole plan on the idea that I'm small, disposable, a tool. He's been so busy being the tragic hero of his own story that he never once considered that the invisible auditor might be the most dangerous person in the entire game. She picked up the phone. He's about to find out what I found out tonight, that the person everybody overlooks is the one who sees the whole board. She looked at Adrian. Wire me. Give me an hour of his voice. And by the time he's done explaining himself, we'll have his confession, his vault, and enough to put him and clear you both at once. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. When did the auditor become the most dangerous person in the room? He said quietly. The moment somebody finally looked, Claire said. They spent the hour building it. Marco fitted her with a wire so small it disappeared into the seam of the same plain black dress she'd been wearing for 18 hours. Now the dress she'd been forced to her knees in, and Claire found a grim poetry in that she'd take Dominic down in the same clothes the world had laughed at her in. Tommy gave them everything he had about the drop points and the storage facility downtown, the private vault, where he'd handed over Sophia's name a dozen times. Adrian and Marco mapped the building, and Claire memorized her own performance, the flinches, the tremble, the grateful broken gratitude of a tool that just wanted to be told what to do. One more thing, Adrian said as she stood by the door ready to leave. If it goes wrong, if he figures it out, you get out. You don't stay for the vault. You don't stay for the confession. You don't stay to be brave. You get out and you let me handle the rest, because I have spent 11 years learning how to handle men like Dominic, and I did not just find you to lose you in a storage facility. His voice cracked just slightly. I've lost enough people to my family's sins. I'm not adding you to the list. Claire looked at him. You know what's funny, she said. This morning I found out that the only person who ever needed me was a murderer using me as a tool. And I thought, that's it. That's my whole worth. I'm the thing people use because nobody looks at me. She stepped closer. And now here you are, terrified of losing me, not because I'm useful, because I'm me. Her voice was soft. You have no idea what that's worth, Adrian. To someone like me. You have no idea what you just gave me. She reached up and touched his face once. So I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to be so careful, because for the first time in my whole life, there's somebody on the other side of the door who wants me to come home. And she left. The address Dominic had sent was not the storage facility. That was the first thing Claire noticed, and it made her stomach drop because it meant he was smarter than their plan. He'd sent her to an apartment, a quiet, expensive apartment on the Upper East Side, and when she stepped off the elevator into the private foyer, Dominic Vale was already standing there waiting for her, and his warm, easy smile was exactly as terrible up close as it had been across a ballroom. Claire Bennett, he said, the last of the Bennetts. Come in, you look exhausted. You look like you've been wearing that dress for a day. His eyes moved over her, and Claire made herself tremble, made herself small, played the tool. Sit. Let me get you something to drink. We have so much to talk about, you and I. 14 years of things to talk about. Claire sat, and Dominic Vale sat across from her, and he began at last to explain himself. And Claire kept her hands folded in her lap and her eyes down and let the man talk. Let him have the scene he'd waited 14 years for, while a wire the size of a grain of rice carried every word to a car parked 3 blocks away, where Adrian Moretti sat with his fists clenched, listening to the voice of the man who'd spent 11 years pretending to love him. You want to know about your grandmother, Dominic said. You want to know about Rosa. She was a good woman, Claire. Brave. She saw them run Sophia off that road, and unlike everyone else who was too afraid of the Morettis to speak, your grandmother walked into a police station and told the truth. His voice softened, and for a moment it was almost human. She died for it, 2 days later. And I have carried that, Claire. I have carried the weight of every good person that family destroyed. Sophia, your grandmother, me. He leaned forward. I loved her. Sophia, Did they tell you that I loved her and her father decided I wasn't good enough? And when she tried to run to me, he killed her rather than let her go. And then he built an empire on top of her grave and raised a son to inherit it. And I have spent every day since making sure that son loses everything exactly the way I did. Adrian didn't kill her, Claire said quietly. She wasn't supposed to say it. It wasn't part of the performance, but it came out of her anyway. He was 22. He didn't even know. Dominic's smile flickered. Adrian is a Moretti, he said. The sins of the father. Are the sins of the father, Claire said. And she lifted her eyes and she was not trembling anymore. And Dominic Vale's face changed as he saw it. Not the son. You know that. You knew Adrian for 11 years. You know he spent his whole life trying to burn down what his father built. You know he's not his father. She sat up straight. But you needed him to be, because if Adrian's innocent, then you're not a hero avenging the woman you loved. You're just a man who spent 14 years learning to hurt people the exact same way the man you hate did. You didn't avenge Sophia Dominic. You became her father. The apartment went very quiet, and Dominic Vale looked at the heavy young woman in the plain black dress that an entire ballroom had laughed at the tool he had farmed for 8 months, the piece he had carved and placed and been so certain of. And Claire watched the exact moment he understood that he had made a mistake. The same mistake everyone always made the mistake of thinking that invisible meant harmless. You're wired, Dominic said softly. It was not a question. And behind him from the hallway, Claire hadn't been able to see a second man stepped into the room holding a gun, and Dominic's warm smile came back wider than ever, and he said, "Oh, Claire, you really are your grandmother's granddaughter, brave, and it's going to get you killed the exact same way it got her killed." He stood. Adrian, I know you can hear me. I know you're close. So let me tell you how the rest of your night is going to go. And 3 blocks away, in a parked car, Adrian Moretti was already moving. Here's how the rest of your night is going to go, Dominic said, pacing now, the gun-holding man behind him steady as a statue. You're going to come up here, Adrian, because you can't help yourself, because the last decent thing left in you won't let you leave a woman to die for your family's sins. And when you walk through that door, my man is going to put you on your knees, and I'm going to make you watch what happens to people who try to save Bennett's. The same thing that happened to Sophia, the same thing that happened to Rosa. He turned to Claire. You were supposed to be my witness, but a wire changes things. A wire means you chose him. So now you're just another loose thread. He smiled, and I don't leave loose threads. Claire did not move. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought the man with the gun could probably see it, but her voice when it came was steady. You're going to shoot me, she said, in your own apartment, with a wire broadcasting to a car 3 blocks away, and a man on his way up who spent 11 years watching you and knows every one of your habits. She tilted her head. That's not the careful Dominic Vale who built a machine for 11 years. That's a man who's panicking. You had a plan and I broke it, and now you're improvising, and you've never improvised in your life. You don't know how. That was always your weakness, Dominic. You're brilliant when you have time. You're nothing when you don't. Shut up, Dominic said. You farmed me for 8 months. Claire went on, and she was not trembling anymore. She was doing the thing as she did best. She was reading the room and speaking the truth out loud until the numbers lined up. You reached into my grandmother's memory and used it as a weapon. You told yourself it was for Sophia, but it was never for Sophia, was it? Sophia wanted out. Sophia wanted a normal life, a good life, a life away from all of this. You said you loved her. If you loved her, you'd have honored that. Instead, you spent 14 years becoming exactly the kind of man she was trying to escape. Claire stood slowly, and the man raised the gun, and she did not stop. She ran away from a house full of men who used people and called it family. And you built one of your own, in her name. That's not love, Dominic. That's the opposite of everything she wanted. If Sophia could see what you've done with her memory, she would be ashamed of you. Dominic Vale's face broke. It happened all at once, the careful mask coming apart, and for 1 second, Claire saw underneath it, saw the boy who'd loved a girl 14 years ago, and lost her and never grown past that dark road, saw the grief that had rotted into something monstrous, and it was the most human he'd looked all night, and the most dangerous. You don't get to say her name, he whispered. Somebody has to, Claire said, because you stopped saying it a long time ago. You say revenge, you say justice, you say the sins of the father, but you don't actually say Sophia anymore, do you? Because somewhere in these 14 years, she stopped being a girl you loved and became an excuse for the man you wanted to be. She held his eyes. I've been invisible my whole life, Dominic, and I'll tell you what invisible people learn. We learn to see the difference between what people say they want and what they actually want. And you don't want Sophia back. You can't have her back. What you want is to not feel small anymore. And the Morettis made you feel small once, so you've spent 14 years making everyone else feel small instead. She took a breath. I know exactly what that feels like, to be made small. And I decided tonight that I was done being small. You should try it. It's better than this. And that was the moment the door opened. Adrian Moretti did not come through it the way Dominic expected. He did not come charging, did not come desperate, did not come to his knees. He walked in the way he had walked across the ballroom, calm and absolute, and behind him came Marco. And behind Marco came two more of his men. And the man with the gun swung it toward the door and found himself facing three weapons instead of one, and in the space of a breath, the whole balance of the room had inverted. Put it down, Adrian said to the gunman, not even raising his voice. You work for a man who's already lost. Look at him. Look at his face. He knows it. Don't die for a dead plan. The gunman looked at Dominic. Dominic did not give an order. And that hesitation, that 1 second of silence where the great Dominic Vale did not know what to do, told the gunman everything, and he set the gun down on the floor and stepped back, and Marco crossed the room and took it, and it was over. The physical part, at least, the part with weapons, that was over. But the real part was just beginning, because Adrian Moretti crossed the room and stood in front of the man who had been his family for 11 years, and the two of them looked at each other, and there was so much grief in that space that Claire could barely stand to be in the room. You loved my sister, Adrian said. I loved your sister, Dominic said, and my father killed her. Your father killed her. Dominic's voice cracked. And you inherited everything he built on top of her body, and you smiled at me across a dinner table for 11 years, and you called me family, and every single time you did, I thought about Sophia lying on that road, and He stopped. His hands were shaking. I was going to take it all, slowly, so you'd feel it. And then at the very end, I was going to tell you why, and I was going to watch you understand, and then it would be even. Then I could stop. 14 years, Adrian. I have wanted to stop for 14 years, and the only way I knew how was to finish it. You could have told me, Adrian said, and his voice broke too. 11 years, Dominic. You could have walked into my study any night and told me the truth about my father, and I would have believed you because I always half knew, and we could have brought him down together while he was still alive to pay for it. Sophia was my sister. I loved her too. You didn't have to carry it alone. You chose to. You chose the machine over me because you'd already decided I was my father and I never got a vote. Dominic stared at him, and Claire watched something pass between the two men. 14 years of grief that had been aimed in exactly the wrong direction. Two people who had loved the same murdered girl and could have been allies and were instead standing on opposite sides of a gun because one of them had let his pain curdle into certainty. The vault, Claire said quietly. Both men looked at her. The templates in the vault, she said, the originals. Your real signature, Adrian, the one Dominic used to forge all the others. The proof that the whole chain is fake. She looked at Dominic. You kept it. A careful man always keeps his originals. And right now, that vault is the only thing standing between Adrian and a prison cell. Because your machine still works, Dominic. It still points at him. Even now, even with everything we know. Without those originals, the numbers still say Adrian Moretti stole $60 million from a children's charity, and no amount of truth about Sophia changes what the paperwork says. She stepped forward. So here's your last choice, the real one, the one that actually decides who you are. You spent 14 years building a lie that frames an innocent man for your dead love's murder. You can let that lie stand, or you can open the vault and hand over the proof and let the truth be the truth for Sophia, for my grandmother, for once. Her voice softened. Sophia tried to run toward the truth. My grandmother died trying to tell it. You can honor them right now or you can be the last one who buries it. Choose. The apartment was silent. Dominic Vale looked at Claire Bennett for a long, long time. The granddaughter of the woman who had tried to save his Sophia, the tool he had farmed the peace, he had carved the invisible auditor who had seen through everything. Rosa was brave, he said finally, and his voice was very quiet. Your grandmother. I told you that, and it was true. She walked into a police station knowing what the Morettis did to people who talked. She did it anyway. He looked down. I used her memory to hurt you. I used a brave woman's death as a weapon against her own granddaughter. And I told myself it was justice. He closed his eyes. Sophia would be ashamed of me. You were right about that. That's the thing I couldn't let myself hear for 14 years, and you said it to my face in a dress you've been wearing for a day, and you were right. He reached into his jacket slowly, and Marco tensed, but it was not a weapon. It was a key. The vault is at the storage facility your errand boy told you about, Dominic said. This opens the box registered under Sophia's name. Everything's there. The originals. The template. Proof that every signature is forged. Proof that I built the whole thing. Enough to clear Adrian and convict me all in one box. He held it out. I've been carrying it for 11 years. I always knew somewhere that one day I'd either use it to finish him or hand it to someone who'd finish me. I just never imagined it would be a Bennett. He looked at Claire. Take it. Claire took the key. Why, Adrian said. After 14 years, why now? Why her? Dominic Vale looked at the woman in the black dress. Because she's what Sophia wanted to be, he said quietly. Free, unafraid, standing up straight in a room full of people who thought she was nothing and refusing to be small. That's who Sophia was trying to become when your father killed her. And I've spent 14 years making sure no one could ever be that free again, because if I couldn't have her, then no one should get to become her. His voice broke completely. And then this woman walked in, and she was Sophia, not in her face, in her spine. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the man who kills that twice. He turned to Adrian. Call whoever you're going to call, he said. The FBI, the police. I won't run. I'm tired, Adrian. I've been tired for 14 years. He sat down slowly on the couch, and all the danger went out of him, and what was left was just a grieving man who had lost the only thing he ever loved and spent his whole life on the wrong revenge. Just promise me one thing. When it's over. When I'm gone, you put her name back on things, Sophia's. You make people remember she was real, and that she wanted out, and that she almost made it. Don't let her be a footnote in your father's story. She was the whole story. She was always the whole story. I promise, Adrian said, and he meant it. The weeks that followed were not the clean, satisfying end that stories promise. Claire learned that the truth is heavier than the lie, that unmaking 14 years of buried crime is slow and painful work, that the world does not thank you for handing it a monster who turns out to be a grieving man. But she did the work. She was, after all, an auditor, and this was the largest and most important audit of her life. She and Adrian took the key to the storage facility, and they opened the box registered under Sophia Moretti's name, and inside they found everything Dominic had promised. The originals, the template, the single document 11 years old that held Adrian's real signature, the one from which every forgery had been copied. And with it laid out in Dominic's own careful hand, the entire architecture of the machine, every fake company, every hidden account, every step of the frame, documented by a man who had always known that a careful man keeps his originals. Claire spent 3 weeks assembling it. She took the $60 million trail that had pointed at Adrian, and she reversed it step by step, thread by thread, until it pointed exactly where the truth had always been. She built a case so clean and so complete that when the federal investigators finally saw it, they did not have a single question, because a woman who reads numbers like scripture had left nothing to interpret. And in the middle of it, she found the other thing, the thing about her grandmother. Because Dominic had told a story on the phone, a story designed to shake her, and some of it was true, and some of it was a weapon, and Claire had needed to know which parts. So she pulled her grandmother's real records, all of them, and she read the truth of Rosa Bennett's life the way she read everything carefully without flinching. And it turned out that the warm little memory, the kitchen table, the sums had been real. Rosa Bennett had taught her granddaughter to read numbers. Not the criminal books Dominic had implied, not some grand conspiracy, just numbers, just a grandmother passing down the one thing she was good at to a lonely little girl who took to it like breathing. Rosa had been a bookkeeper, an honest one. That was why she'd recognized what she saw on that road for what it was, why she'd had the courage to walk into a police station, why she'd understood that some things have to be reported no matter what it costs. Claire had inherited her grandmother's gift. That part was true, but not because of a conspiracy, because of love, because a good woman had sat with a small girl at a kitchen table and given her the one thing that would 14 years later bring down the men who killed her. She's the reason, Claire told Adrian one night when the case was nearly done, when the two of them sat in the quiet house behind the gate that had somehow become the place she felt most herself. My grandmother. She died trying to tell the truth about your sister, and everyone forgot her, and her killer walked free for 14 years. And the only thing she left behind was a 9-year-old girl who could read numbers. Claire's voice was thick, and that girl grew up invisible, and nobody ever looked at her twice, and she started to believe she didn't matter. And then one night she opened a spreadsheet, and every single thing her grandmother gave her came together, and she brought them all down. Your father, Dominic, all of it. My grandmother reached across 14 years and finished what she started through me. She wiped her eyes. She wasn't a footnote either, Adrian. Neither of them were. Two women the powerful decided didn't matter. And they're the reason none of you got away with it. Adrian took her hand. You know what I keep thinking about, he said. That night, the ballroom. I walked past every model in that room, every socialite, every person who had spent a fortune to be seen. And I stopped in front of the one woman who was trying to disappear. He looked at her. Everyone in that room thought they understood why. They thought I was going to have you removed. Vivian Cross laughed, and I've thought about it 100 times since why I crossed that floor, and I finally understand it. He held her eyes. It's because you were the only real person in the room. Everyone else was a performance. You were just a woman holding a folder trying to survive, and I'd spent 11 years surrounded by performances, and I was so tired of them. I didn't stop in front of you because you found the missing millions. I stopped in front of you because you were the only person in that entire glittering room who wasn't pretending to be something. You were just yourself. And I hadn't seen that in so long I'd forgotten it existed. Claire looked at him. I spent my whole life, she said, thinking that being invisible was the worst thing that could happen to a person. That mattering meant being seen, being wanted, being chosen. And I was wrong. She squeezed his hand. Being seen isn't the thing. Being seen truly is the thing. Vivian Cross is seen by 1,000 people and known by none of them. And I was invisible to the whole world and known completely by the one person who mattered. She smiled. I'd rather have that. I'd rather have one person who looks at me the way you do than a whole ballroom that looks past me. It took me 31 years to learn that, but I learned it. The case closed on a Tuesday. Dominic Vale pled guilty to everything, and he never once tried to run. And when they took him away, he looked for the first time in 14 years at peace, like a man who had finally set down a weight he'd been carrying so long. He'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. The frame against Adrian collapsed entirely. The $60 million was recovered and returned to the foundation, and every fake company and forged signature was traced back to its architect. And in the reopened files of two 14-year-old deaths, the truth was finally written down, where it could not be buried again, that Sophia Moretti had not died in an accident, and that Rosa Bennett had not died of heart failure, and that both of them had been murdered by a powerful man to protect a lie, and that the lie was over now. Adrian Moretti did the thing he had wanted to do for 18 months, the thing that had set the whole terrible machine in motion. He ended the organization. He took everything his family had built on cruelty and buried money, and he turned it into something clean, a foundation that bore his sister's name, that did the honest good that Sophia had wanted to escape into. And the first thing that foundation funded at Claire's quiet insistence was a scholarship for kids from nowhere invisible. Kids, overlooked kids, the ones nobody looks at twice, named after a bookkeeper called Rosa Bennett. New York's elite still talked about the gala. They talked about the night the most feared man in the city walked past every model in the room. But now they talked about something else too, because they had learned her name, all of them, the woman who had been forced to her knees on a marble floor and then stood up and brought down 3 men and an empire. Vivian Cross, who had planted a diamond heel on Claire's shoulder and told her to crawl, found that doors began closing to her all over the city, quietly the way doors close when everyone suddenly remembers who you really are. And Claire Bennett, who had once written her name on her lunch so no one would steal it, found that her name now opened rooms that would have laughed her out 8 months before. She did not need those rooms. That was the thing. She walked into them now and out of them again, and they no longer defined her because she had learned the secret that the whole glittering world spends fortunes trying to buy and never can. She had learned that being visible to everyone is worth nothing, and being truly seen by the right person is worth everything, and that the person the whole world overlooks is very often the only one in the room who can see clearly enough to change everything. Because in the end, the Mafia boss did not walk past every model in that room and stop in front of a nobody. He stopped in front of the only person there who was real. And the woman the world had spent 31 years refusing to see turned out to be the one person alive who could see the whole truth, tell it without fear, and stand up straight in a room full of people who thought she was nothing. That was Claire Bennett. That was always Claire Bennett. And no one ever again would make the mistake of looking past her.